Welcome. So today we're going to go ahead and get started and talk about Scrappy strategies for a resource-conscious HR team. Akila, I don't know if you wanted to. Yeah, I'll pass the mic over to you.
Oh, awesome. Thanks, Melanie. I'm so excited to be here with you because there's a large group of our customers that fall into this range of companies who only have a few people leading their people function. And so they're all really eager to learn what you're going to recommend around what companies can do to help scale their role while still meeting pressing business needs. And I'm excited to learn from you because I know you have a range of experience in orgs with much larger people teams to smaller ones. I think everyone's going to benefit from some of the best practices today. I am Akila. I lead our customer success team here at Athena, and I'm more than happy to share how our existing customers have been kind of engaging with the platform, but also how they've been scrappy in some difficult times for smaller companies. And Melanie, I'm happy to have you introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Melanie. I head up the people team here at Athena. I'm super excited to be partnering with Akila on CS. I always say I feel like HR is a version of customer success. I feel like customer success for the product, and then I think HR is customer success for the employees. So I feel like this is going to be an interesting dynamic, and I'm super stoked for it.
I love that. Maybe that's why we get along. It's like our passions to build long-term relationships with people, right? So have a lot in common.
Love it. Also, just side note, your picture is fabulous. It was the brightest, sunniest day ever, as opposed to the apocalypse that is outside my window right now. Anyone on the anyone in the Northeast, if you feel me right now, give me some love in the comments. It is bad out there. Everybody stay safe, be breathing healthy. And also a heads up to everyone that we are actually running a promotion right now where you can actually get the first few months of Athena for free. So sign up for a demo to learn more, and you can use the link here or the QR code here or reach out if you have any questions. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and I will kick it off. So first and foremost, if you've ever been to one of my webinars before, you know that I like a good interactive question. So just so you all know, I'm going to ask the question. I'm going to ask you all to put your answers in the comments section. If you don't want me to call on you, put a little asterisk next to your response. I don't want you to not contribute because you're scared of being called on. But if I do call on you, Amanda, who's working tirelessly behind the scenes, will give you access to unmute yourself so you can jump in and elaborate. So I'm going to throw out a little pulse question here and ask on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being I super agree with this statement, 1 being heck no, what are you talking about? Who here thinks that, my team, your team, the HR team has the perfect ratio of work responsibilities to team size? There's a perfectly manageable amount. The work that we have. 5, yes, I have very manageable workload. 1 being, are they serious right now? It's okay, I'll give everyone a second in case you're shy. Okay, got a 2.5, thank you. Okay, 1, thank you for the honesty. I appreciate that. It can be scary. Lita, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and unmute yourself. Tell me a little bit more about why you gave a 1 here. Not that I disagree with you.
That's perfectly fine. I'm happy to share with whoever wants to listen. While my team is relatively small, we are 22, small but mighty. I am a department of 1, and I work in the cannabis industry, which is in its nascent stages when it comes to having procedures and policies as well established as in other industries. So a lot of this I'm learning as I go. I don't have, unfortunately, the budget to contract like HR professionals. So it feels like a lot of responsibility, especially on the compliance end of things, for someone that hasn't received the proper training. So I am just hanging on by a thread here, y'all.
Oh boy, thank you for sharing. And by the way, if you don't mind me asking, how big is your company? How many employees do you all have?
22 in California.
Got it. Okay. And California is a very important state. You all have some very tight laws there. So it's a tough one. And I want to throw out there really now what you're thinking about is you are one person supporting 22 people, including yourself. It's quite a lot to ask of you. So I can imagine that that's quite stressful. And I think you touched on something really important too, if you don't mind me touching on this, which is, this concept that, oh, I might not even have been trained on this. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? What do you mean when you say that? And for the record, like I'm in the same boat sometimes.
Yeah, well, I have an immense amount of respect for folks that, for lack of a better word, are scrappy, wear many hats, are willing and eager to lean in. I would say that the people component of this has always been a passion of mine. So I feel like I really excel in culture and in building relationships and in making sure that we have a roadmap for people's success. But when it comes to, we just had our first employee that took maternity leave. That was a lot to try to figure out in a state like California. So thankfully everyone is super patient and we're in like deep startup mode in a startup industry. So there is a lot of grace, but I have this, things like salary bands and, recruitment strategies and things like that. Like I just haven't had the bandwidth for. And right now I'm currently hiring and I'm building these job descriptions and policies and internal structure as I go.
100%. I think people don't talk enough about just how broad and encompassing the HR people field is. It's everything. It's employee wellness, it's employee engagement, it's employee happiness, it's performance reviews, it's performance management, it's DEI, it's compliance, it's all these things. And it can be really hard to be an expert in all of them. So I've never met anyone who's an expert in everything, but also someone who can sometimes anticipate things that nobody could anticipate. I mean, think about being in HR when the pandemic hit. No one had ever dealt with that before, right? Thank you for being so open. I'm going to call on one more person. Krista, if you don't mind unmuting yourself, is any of this resonating with you? Are there other challenges that are up that you're coming up with that made you list a 2 in response to this question?
Yeah, so it's I think it's just been a lot. We are a smallish organization in like the Northeast Minneapolis area, so Twin Cities, Minnesota, and we've got we keep kind of hovering at just over the 100 employee mark. And so really the HR department is me and an intern who really schedule has been inconsistent, so I don't have a ton of reliability there. So it's functionally like a 1.5 of us, maybe 1.25 of us. And so it's all of that. We're also in a small kind of startup consulting type arena. So I do external consulting in addition to my internal responsibilities. And I could really use more people because that's when something internal happens, or one of our internal divisions is currently splitting off to become its own separate company. So we're having to deal with the reverse merger and acquisition scenario of how do we split this apart? What do we do with our HRIS? What do we do with our benefits? How are we going to get them set up? How do we have conversations with the employees? When do we have conversations with the employees? And it's just all of that comes across my desk, and talk about never being trained for that. Everyone talks about what do you do when your organization grows by leaps and bounds, not when you're hovering at this 100 employee mark and all of a sudden you're talking about shrinking by however many.
100%. I mean, first of all, I can only imagine what you are going through right now. It sounds super stressful. And I think also what I'm hearing is, you're talking about all these strategic things that you have to worry about. And in the meantime, there's probably a bunch of tactical stuff that has to get done. And you're kind of like, who has time for that? I don't have time to think about onboarding right now. I'm trying to figure out how we're going to do this reverse merger and acquisition. And so there's a lot of stress that can come with the people side of things. And I think what we're getting at really is, yeah, we have a lot on our plates. And so to the extent possible, we really need to figure out how to be as scrappy as possible, how to streamline and optimize the work that we are putting out there so that we're not doing double the work, and how to make sure that we can do what is unfortunately a real need in the HR world, which is doing more with less, increasingly less, as there are budget cuts, as there are cuts to headcount, which you're alluding to here. So hopefully we're going to be able to address some of that over the course of this panel.
100%. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you all for sharing. Oh, this is great. I'm loving it. We're having a real engaging chat with everyone. Yes. All right. So let's talk about how we can build scrappy strategies for the resource conscious HR team, AKA literally every HR team in the world. We're going to cover it with three top level areas. One is, how do you streamline and automate? How do you make sure that every single second of your time is optimized, that you are not repeating yourself unless absolutely necessary, that you're not doing double that work. You also want to make sure that we're talking about, how do we distribute the workload? How do we make sure that not everything is falling on us? Because realistically, we can't do everything. And it's important that we acknowledge and communicate that. And then lastly, we just want to talk a little bit about how we can lean on the existing work of others. HR teams have been around for literally decades, okay? And so it's really important that we just make sure that, hey, if there's work that's out there, why not leverage that instead of starting from scratch every time? So we're talking about real tactical ways that we can apply that and different projects that you might be currently working on where this could apply. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and ask just one more pulse check question before we jump into the first section. So just a quick yes or no. This is even easier than 1 to 5. Yes or no. Who here has repetitive tasks or projects on their plate? If everyone says no, we can just skip this section. It wasn't relevant and I was off the mark. I'm sorry. Okay. All right. So we've got a yes and we've got a no. I'm actually going to be interested to hear both because Lita, if you have no repetitive tasks or projects, you have figured out the game. I want to learn more from you. So Kate, why don't you go ahead and unmute yourself? You could tell me a little bit more about what kinds of repetitive tasks or projects are on your plate right now.
Sure. So I approve all of the expense reports for all of our entire company. That's pretty repetitive. What else? Goodness. Kind of like sometimes repeating what our benefits are. People can't find the answer. Yeah, the expense reports is like the first one that comes to my mind.
I mean, those are.
If I think of any.
Go ahead.
I'll drop them if I can remember any others.
No worries at all. I think you're touching on a couple of really important ones. So anything spreadsheet related, anything payroll related is always super manual and super repetitive. And then on the employee questions one, that's such an important one. I don't think people really think about how much time and energy it takes to stop what you're doing and answer a question, especially if the answer already exists somewhere else. It's sort of like, oh my gosh, why am I answering this question a million times? It can be both a time suck, but also just like a mental frustration drain, you know? Thank you for sharing. I'm actually going to call on Lita here because I'm just really curious. Tell me a little bit more about how you've gotten to a place where you don't have any repetitive tasks or projects. That's really important. It's great.
Well, I really appreciate the positive spin on that. I think the reason I answered that way is because I have so many different projects. And I have a small team. So everyone's asking me a lot of different questions. But what I will say, what was paramount to any automation was getting the proper HIRS system. I'm currently using Bamboo HR, which is pretty scrappy itself. It doesn't have all the fancy bells and whistles. And honestly, that works really great for me because as I mentioned, I'm starting out. And then I've cobbled together what I could describe as like a Frankenstein network of like free platforms. So folks like Zapier, Slack automations, like I really lean into whatever technology platforms we're currently using and like how they can benefit me. Granted, I'm fairly comfortable in that. And I realize that not everyone is. So where I run into trouble is I don't have a lot of budget. So when these platforms ask for a subscription, that's where I'm like jumping to the next one. So long story short, it's just every day is different in my ecosystem. And I just really lean on the technology that we use and especially the ones that we pay for to help me out.
I think that's fabulous. I think that's so smart and spot on. It's actually something we're going to talk about a little bit, which is what I'm hearing is you're sort of doing that upfront work, right? You're being super savvy about how can I save myself time in the long run, even if it means having to learn a new system or having to go out and do that research. And to your point, it doesn't come easily to everyone, right? It might be like, oh, new system, I don't have time for that. So I think you should be really proud of the skill that you have and that you're leaning so far into that. But I do hear you on the flip side, which is there's not even an opportunity to have repetitive tasks because I keep getting thrown new things all the time. So with that said, let's talk about when things aren't streamlined and automated for anyone on the call who might be identifying with this and who might need a little bit of help. So on the people team, there are usually a couple different types of recurring responsibilities. It might be something as simple as onboarding. So every time I have to onboard someone, I have to do all this stuff. Lita, you sort of alluded to the HRIS, right? I've got to put in this information and it sounds like you have a better HRIS platform that is working for you now. Some people might not have one, right? Some people might have one where it's like, okay, I've got to or I've got to put together, here's what I put in the HRIS, but here's what I put in a separate spreadsheet, and I have to track it in 3 different places. And every time I have to update it anytime there's a change, right? There's also employee surveys, right? Which isn't like a one and done, right? They're happening every year, or some people do pulse surveys where it's like every month you're putting something out, which I don't quite recommend, but to each their own. Required trainings, right? Okay, just put out a management training. Okay, now we have a new batch of managers. How do I get them trained up? And performance reviews, right? Those happen all the time and they're repetitive and they're recurring, and you wish it could be one and done, but not really, because you're going to have to do it again the next cycle, right? And each time these processes kick off, it can feel like we're starting a little bit from scratch, right? Especially if you're sort of in autopilot mode, right? Okay, what questions do I want to ask this time in the survey? Or, okay, who do we want to complete the engagement survey? Is it people who started, 3 months or more ago? Or are we going to cut down on tenure required for completing the survey? Sometimes it's something as simple as, oh gosh, we're doing this thing and we're doing performance reviews and I don't think managers are trained for it. We got 5 new managers and I never told them how to do salary bands. Or even what the timeline is. Well, do we want it to take 2 weeks now? What date do we want to start? Well, I think a bunch of people are off on PTO, so now you got to stop and really think about these things, right? And what happens is, the reason that this can happen and it feels like starting from scratch every time is because it's kind of alluding to what Lita's talking about here. A lot of people don't put the work up front. And for the record, I want to have a lot of empathy for anyone who's listening to this and thinking, I don't have the time for the upfront strategic work that needs to go into this. I totally hear that. If you're already strapped for time, it can feel like an impossible task. And also, if you don't do the upfront work, it means that every time this happens, you're going to have to do it again. You're going to have to answer these questions again. You're going to have to ask yourself, well, what was I thinking last time? What was I optimizing for last time? I'm not really sure. And so what I would recommend to everyone is to find ways to make decisions upfront, commit to them, and then automate them moving forward. And questions that you can ask yourself to help get there are, why are we even doing this? Why are we doing this employee engagement survey? What exactly are we trying to solve with it, right? Because once you have that answer, that will then help you inform, okay, what questions do I want to ask? How often do I want to run this? Versus, I'm doing an engagement survey because I have to, but I haven't thought through this. So now I don't know if I'm going to have to run it again in 6 months or not. I don't know if it solved the problem I was trying to solve, right? So you want to start asking yourself really strategic questions. You also want to ask yourself questions like, what's missing? What's important? Like what's a must have? And what's a nice to have? Because oftentimes we will find ourselves doing things that really we worked a lot harder than we needed to. Really, I didn't need to ask 50 questions in that survey. I could have gotten the job done in 20 questions, right? Really, I could have done the performance review with just 3 areas that they needed to fill out, right? So you really want to think about, okay, what's a nice to have, what's a need to have. You also want to think about how much bandwidth you have. One of you shared that you're a 1-person team. So due to bandwidth needs, you might just need to chop a bunch of the nice to haves. You might just have to say, nope, we're not doing any of that. Nope, the survey is going to be 10 questions because I only have time to review 10 questions versus I'm going to do 20 questions and then not have the time to actually go through the data. And then finally, you want to think about what resources or processes you need to put in place to help automate that process, similar to what Lita was talking about, right? What free platforms can you find if you don't have the money, or what money can you advocate for if there could be budget for that, okay? With that said, I want to look at some specifics of what this could look like in action. So another quick pulse question. Yes, no, who here has ever rolled out an employee survey only to find that you actually couldn't act on one of the questions that you asked, and I'll give an example here. We actually a little while ago asked, we asked in a survey recently, like, oh, like how pleased are you with our health benefits? And the reality is we realized like, oh, well, we're not prepared to change them anytime soon. And so it was sort of like, oh, why did we ask that question? Has anybody else ever experienced this? I'll give you all a quick second to say yes or no. Ooh, haven't done one yet. Okay, maybe we caught you at a good time then, because maybe we can share some helpful resources. Ooh, Kate, you just sent out your first one today. Kate, could you go ahead and unmute yourself? I'd actually be curious, what was your thought process as you were putting these questions together? How many questions did you end up including, and how long are you giving your employees to complete the survey?
Sure. Well, I was at the webinar that you did last week, so it was very helpful about employee surveys, and I am giving them 2 weeks to respond. I did 24 questions. I cut it down a lot. It was like 35, and then based on your recommendations, I cut it down. Yeah, and it just ranges about our company values, DE&I, sort of job satisfaction, our benefits, all those types of topics. So yeah, just 24 questions, but mostly scaled questions and not all open-ended questions. So
Oh,
hopefully that'll, hopefully show
Yeah.
some stuff that we can action on.
Yeah, for anyone who doesn't know what Kate's talking about, scale-based questions are basically like 1 to 5, give me a score, versus an open-ended question. And the reason that we recommend that is because you can track progress over time with a score. Whereas if an open-ended question, if you do the survey again 1 year from now, how will you know if you actually did better? It's going to be pretty hard to track that in a neutral way. So I love that you leaned into scale-based questions. Yes, Kate. Okay, let's call on one more person. Lita. Yes. Okay. So this happened to you. Tell me more. How did it happen? Why? And what was the, I'm guessing, fallout?
Yeah, sorry to be hogging the mic here, y'all, but so it was unintentional. Like when we devised the questions, we were like, okay, we can actually we can do something about the responses. And then we realized, wow, this takes a lot more time than we thought it was going to be. And to give you guys an overview, we have quarterly check-ins. 2 of those are just like yes, no, scaled. And we have the employee and the manager answer the exact same questions so that we can look for unalignment or we can look for alignment. And the other 2 are more like formal reviews, performance reviews. So we have set ourselves up to be in a very communicative cadence. And one questionnaire can differ from the next one, and not always in a positive sense. So where I feel like we need to figure out our strategy is how we train our managers, because we're getting a lot of response from our non-management employees, but I don't feel like we've been able to align how our managers respond to their feedback. That's been my biggest hurdle.
Oh, I love that. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about that later on in today's call. Ooh, that's great. I think you touched on something so critical, which is, I think in every HR person's heart, there's like a little overachiever who's like, I'm going to do all the things. I'm going to solve all the problems. We're going to be the best company ever. And you were hinting at sort of this idea that, yeah, you asked more questions that you could actually answer, that you could actually action on, right? And that's a very common, I think, mistake in the people world, right? Where it's sort of like, here's my beautiful vision. I'm going to roll it out. Oh, wait, I can't actually deliver on it, right? With just 1 person or 2 people. And so some of the ways that with an employee engagement survey, for example, that you could help minimize that is, when rolling out a question, make sure that you're avoiding some of these, common mistakes, which is asking more questions than you actually need or can action on, losing time on logistics, like the email communications, right? Oh gosh, I'm gonna have to send an email to the managers or company-wide, and we have to make sure we answer all the questions, or we have to align on timeline because, the executive team is not gonna be happy about the fact that we're doing it right before performance reviews or right after performance reviews because all the scores are gonna be lower, right? Or who are we gonna assign the survey to? Is it gonna be people who joined 3 months ago? Is it gonna be managers? Oh, what if they just changed managers? Never mind, I don't wanna assign it to them because they're gonna be upset because they just had a manager change, right? All these questions that come up, and they come up every time, right? Or even just answering employee questions. Wait, what survey are you talking about? Where do I go to fill it out? Wait a second, can I change my questions after I submit it? Is it anonymous? Okay, but hang on, what do you mean by anonymous? Can somebody's gonna look at it, right? Who's gonna look at it, right? All these questions that come up, and then you lose that time having to answer those questions. So to the extent possible, ways that you can streamline this process and really reduce your load is focus on the high risk areas only. And so Kate, sounds like you did a fabulous job of this, right? Where you really just focused on what do I actually need to know? For the record, with an employee engagement survey, my recommendation is ask questions that whose responses could lead to turnover, because that's the whole goal with an engagement survey, right? You're trying to understand, are people engaged or are people going to quit? And so, you could look up Gallup, for example, that has like a great, they have great stay interview questions. We offer some as well, by the way, we'll link to later on, right? Find out what are the things we know. Employees leave when they have lack of growth opportunities. Employees leave when they don't have a good relationship with their manager. Employees leave when they don't feel that they're well paid, right? Ask questions about the things that you know are genuinely high impact. Maybe don't ask a question around, I don't know, do you love the snacks in the office? Probably not as high impact. It's probably one you can cut. Just going to throw that out there. If anybody disagrees with me, let's duke it out in the comments. I'm super open to this. Creating reusable email templates, right? Why would you write a new email every single time? It's the same information, right? Just have a doc that has your emails that you wrote, and next time you do it, copy and paste it. You don't have to start from scratch, right? Period-based timelines. So sometimes people get lost in the weeds of like, okay, the specific dates that we're doing. Just say it's going to be 2 weeks from whatever date that you decide to roll it out. And same thing around if you want to pick, periods within the year, right? Like, okay, we're always going to do it 3 months after the performance review. I don't want any more discussion around this, right? Because we're going to have to go back and forth every time. And finally, an FAQ that you can just direct employees to every single time. Just answer all the questions up front and they can go there every time. They reach out and just send them the link, right? So these are some ways that you can start to automate and really streamline these processes for yourself. Similar approach when it comes to required trainings, right? If you have required management trainings or required onboarding trainings or required harassment prevention training, which is legally required in many states, right? You might lose time trying to determine, well, which states have to do which trainings, or wait, when do we want to train managers? Is it before they become a manager, after they become a manager? Do they need to take it 3 months within becoming a manager, right? Maybe you host live trainings, and then every time a new hire starts, or every time you bring up a new manager, now you have to spend an hour of your day doing the same, sharing the same information that you already shared, right? Again, logistics, communications, when to assign, who, all these things, right? Instead, right, you might want to just answer your questions up front. What are the questions that what are the trainings that we're going to assign to who, when, and on what cadence, right? Just make that decision up front. You also want to think about how you can automate this process. So for example, why would you do the same live training again when you could just record it and then share that link with new managers? Now, obviously, you use your discretion. There are some sessions that are more effective live, and that for certain reasons you may want to do live, and that's fine. But oftentimes, if you really push, usually you can assign something virtually and just have someone watch the recording. If you even have like a whole management training series, you could have them watch, the 4 recordings and then do one live roundtable where you follow up on any questions that may have come up from that training, right? So really think about how you can work smarter, not harder. And I also want to throw out there that sometimes with things like this, feelings of guilt can come up, like, oh, I feel like I'm not working hard enough, right? Oh, I feel like I'm not putting enough time and effort into this. That's actually not something to be ashamed of. It's called efficiency, right? Like it's you are deciding how to use your time as efficiently as possible, and how to make sure that, knowing how valuable your time is, that you're spending it in the right places. So for anyone who's feeling like, oh, but it feels too easy, good. That means you're doing it right. All right. I'm gonna just throw out if you ever have any questions, throw them in the comment section. I'm keeping an eye on it. But with that said, I'm actually gonna pass the mic over to Keela to share how, if you're interested, Athena can help solve with some of these problems.
Yeah, and what's top of my melody of what you just said around required trainings is what we've heard from customers is they're starting to launch all their trainings at once in a given quarter, so that your marketing and communications can be streamlined. And then chasing and tracking down completion can be streamlined as well. So what that could look like for you all who have required trainings, even for organizations of 20 plus employees, but have learners in California, like you mentioned, Lita, is like you train on harassment prevention, data privacy, or any kind of specific regulatory trainings all at once, launch them all in January and have a deadline for 3 months, for example. And that way, at the end of March, you're figuring out how to communicate to all the learners who haven't completed their training, but you're doing that for all the trainings at once rather than having to do something like that every single month. So because we're talking about how we can automate your role, as mentioned on this call, there's a few products that we can support you with between our LMS Essentials and our Surveys products. So LMS Essentials allows you to host any homegrown training within our platform. So you can use Athena's existing reminder and notification functionality to hopefully automate all of that background work for you all. We even have the capability to roll up to your managers any insights around their team's completion. So you don't have to do that chasing as a 1 or 2 person people team. And then our Surveys product also allows you to send surveys through the same platform. So a lot of our customers have coming to us with the overall proposition of needing to consolidate tools. So having your training and surveys in one place has been really exciting for them. And then you're able to create your surveys in a place with the integrations already there, so that you don't have to figure out how am I going to get the people data involved in order to send the survey out and get deep, rich insights into it. As Melanie was mentioned, it's like the most important part of sending a survey, right? Like analyzing and making sure you can take the results and feed that back to your leadership team and produce meaningful initiatives as a result.
Also, something that I love about what you shared, Akila, is like this sort of, I feel like you're in this really unique position where you can just crowdsource data. Like you get to talk with so many people experts, right? And learn this really valuable information like, oh, the trends are showing that people are starting to do them all at the same time, right? I think, we had a question and we'll answer more questions towards the end. But, a question came in about like, how do I learn more information? How do I make sure I'm staying up to date on like the latest trends or like staying as scrappy as possible? Really talking to other people experts, same way Akila is doing, same way I do with like joining people communities, which I'll share a few of my favorites that I recommend towards the end. But yeah, making sure that you are crowdsourcing data, because I promise you someone out there has figured out a faster, better, more efficient way of doing the thing that you are currently struggling with.
And I think leaning on your vendors as well. So if your HRIS or your parts of your HR tech stack already might have the tooling in place, you might not need to build it from scratch, which I know we'll talk about later.
That is a great point. Like making sure that like if you're already paying people to do stuff, ask them like, hey, I have a challenge. By the way, do you happen to have a thing that could help me with that? I think that's great.
Yeah, because usually they have in-house subject matter experts like you that we can just like tag and see if there's something that exists.
Love that. All right, awesome. So we'll move ahead to the second section, which is distributing the workload. Got another pulse question for you all. I know that you are loving these. I know I am. It makes me feel like I'm not just talking into the ether. So thanks for humoring me. Scale of 1 to 5, 5 being I super agree with this statement, 1 not at all. Employee success is solely HR's responsibility. The success of your employees is only for HR to be responsible for, and no one else. 5, I agree. 1, I don't agree. Okay, we've got a 2, got a 1. Okay, awesome. Krista, I'd love to call on you. Why is this a 2 for you? Tell me a little bit more.
So I think, and I struggle with this because I want to own everything. Just like when you said that there's a little overachiever inside every HR person, I'm like, oh yeah, I do that. So I want sometimes to say that it's entirely mine, but I also don't want I don't want my managers or my other team leaders to feel like it's not their job to help their employees be successful too. Especially when we're a smaller organization, like everybody needs to be involved, I would think. And I think like, I think there's a responsibility on the employee too, that if there's something that you are needing that you're not getting, you can't just wait around and wait for someone else to notice. I think you have to speak up and advocate for yourself. And I also think that your managers, if they're being good leaders, they're also checking in with you and they're asking those sorts of things, like what would help to make you successful. And that I don't think that should all fall on HR shoulders.
I think that's exactly right. And I want to have like super empathy for you and for all HR people for a second, right? Which is, it can be really hard to let go. It can feel like failure. It can feel like laziness. It can feel like, an inability to figure out how to do it yourself. Right? It can feel like all those things. And also when we take a step back, as you alluded to, right? Actually, I know logically that it is the right call to spread the load, right? And yet it's so hard. So I just want to acknowledge that for a quick second. And actually, I'll be vulnerable for a quick second if you all don't mind. Akila gave me some fabulous feedback. I think it was earlier this week where Akila was like, Melanie, you need to delegate some more. Like, why are you doing all this? So, it's a constant. We are all struggling with this constantly. And I kind of, I compare it to sort of like people managers. I think whether you manage people or not in your current role, right? You might be a one-person team. I think all people are ultimately, they're people managers, right? You're managing people, you're managing your teams. And so similar to how people managers can struggle with delegating to their teams, either because of a sense of guilt or because they're worried that the person's not going to do it as well as they would do it, right? Or they're worried that it's going to look like they're not being a team player because they're not willing to do it, right? Just remind yourself, oh, what advice would I give to a people manager who is going through this right now? And I'm going to guess that you would encourage them to do it because not only would it lighten their load, it's also a growth opportunity, right? For everyone else that they delegate to, right? It's also a growth opportunity for our managers to be able to own things themselves, for our employees to be able to own things themselves. So thank you very much for sharing. So, really, I want everyone to just keep in mind that you don't have to do it alone. It is a shared responsibility. And I bet that there are people who are hungry to help you out. I bet there are people who are hungry to take a stab at this, help you, who want to step into this, learn from it, and have some agency in this process. So remember that you don't have to tackle things alone. In fact, I would argue that it's actually impossible to be truly successful on your own. You do need buy-in and you do need support for initiatives because they're people initiatives. They entail everyone, not just you. It's not a silo, it's everyone. So definitely pushing to not do it alone. And tactical ways that I would recommend for anyone who's struggling to understand, like, okay, but how do I understand that I'm bought in, but like how? I would recommend start with two things. One, equip your managers with the tools that they need to manage effectively. And when I say manage effectively, I mean things like coaching, performance management, talking about salaries, right? These are all things where if you don't train them on it, guess what? Is absolutely going to fall on you. And usually it will come to you when it's too late. It will come to you when it's time for damage control. I'm going to guess people on the other side of this are sort of like, yep, I'm the damage control police, right? We don't want to do that, right? We want to be proactive about these things. So 3 tips that I have for you all, and I'll even actually read out some of the specific questions that we offer in case anybody wants to write them down. I love them. They have helped us tremendously. 1, performance check. Pulse check questions. And I'm going to say these out because I think that when we talk about training managers on how to manage or monitor performance, it can feel like this really complicated thing. Here's this 9-page rubric, how we define performance, how we define success. It doesn't need to be that way. In fact, at Athena, we have just 3 pulse check questions, and we have every manager ask themselves these 3 questions periodically. And if at any point their answers are iffy, that's when it's time to escalate. We don't make them monitor against like a very specific metric, page or anything like that. It's just 3 questions. 1, is my direct report ultimately making my job easier or harder? 2, if this person were to put in their resignation today, would I panic or be relieved? And 3, if I could go back in time, would I hire this person again? And you can see how those 3 questions, they're so brief, they're so short, and yet they really pack a punch. It really gets to the core issue. Is this person ultimately performing or not? And if the answers are all flying colors, yes, they're great, awesome. We don't need to have a whole 30-minute check-in. Okay, you did the work. Thank you. But if the answers are iffy, okay, now let's have a chat, right? Introspective questions of the week. This is something that we do at Athena. So every other week, there's a question that we give out company-wide, and every manager asks it of their direct report. And it could be questions like, on a scale of 1 to 5, how motivated are you when you come to work every day? Or, you know, what's one thing as a company that we could be doing better? Or what's one thing that I, as your manager, could be helping you with? Or, you know, 1 to 5, you know, what are your stress scale? What are your stress levels this week, right? And all of those, they're very simple questions, and it's a very easy process for you. You have a list of questions, you share one, done, right? And also it does the work of proactively digging for potential underlying issues that you might not otherwise be aware of. And Akila, I think, worded it really well. It's like a sneaky pulse check survey, right? It's like a sneaky survey without actually having everyone complete a survey, right? And then finally, training and survey completion data, right? Whatever vendor you are using, make sure that your vendor allows you to distribute the data. So, you know, for like Athena with our trainings, you can send reminders to all managers. You can send them an email with everyone on everyone who reports into them who hasn't completed the training. Great. Now they can go and remind their employees to complete the training versus you having to chase individuals down. On the empowering employees front, a couple of things that I would recommend. Make sure that you are having employees play an active role in their own engagement and in the creation of an effective, inclusive workplace culture. Ways that we have recommended, or that we are tackling that at Athena and that I recommend, are at Athena, for example, you know, rather than, oh, let's invest, you know, 10K in this, you know, virtual happy hour that we really hope everyone's going to attend. We just told everyone, hey, you can expense up to $100 per month to do something with someone else at the company, whatever you want. Want to go have pizza together? Want to go get your nails done? Want to go, you know, kayaking? I think, Akila, you went kayaking actually with the.
I went stand-up paddleboarding with our perk, and I'm gonna meet my coworker on Friday to get lunch. Yeah, I'm excited about it.
Nice. Yes, I used it to go to a Broadway play in New York. So you can see that everyone, the really cool thing about this is I, as the head of HR, did not have to plan any of this. I didn't have to figure out, oh, what does every employee want to do? How do I pick a solution that's right for everyone? No, here's some money, go figure it out yourselves, right? And we picked an amount of money that we could afford, right? So think about ways that you can.
Melanie, it's something smart you also did. Sorry to interrupt, but we were talking about like how to get budget for some of these things, and we realized, like, being a mostly remote workplace, we're not having like a fancy holiday party every year, right? So instead, we're reallocating that budget to have something fun and engaging to do every month. With the people you have proximity to. So there might be places where you maybe had budget and you no longer have the need for that budget anymore, you could use.
I think that's super smart. Yeah, you're right, because that happened when we downsized our office, and now we've actually gotten rid of our office altogether. And so great, now we can repurpose those funds. And then the last two, I'll be real brief because I know we're running just a little bit short on time. A distributed DEI philosophy. So we believe that DEI is everyone's responsibility, not just one person's responsibility. And so everyone is encouraged and empowered to, you know, if today is an awareness month or something, share it with us, talk about it, right? And then finally, you know, training your employees with trainings that help educate them on how to create the workforce that you want to create, rather than you having to educate everyone on the workforce that you want to create, right? You can outsource things. They exist out there. And in fact, I believe that Akila is going to be talking about some of this stuff and how you can, you know, make this work.
You covered a couple, but wanted to share a few things that we've heard from other customers. So some of our customers are actually leveraging webinars like Melanie's or ones today to actually listen to the recordings as a group and then have small breakout sessions to have discussions. We're going to be releasing discussion guides ourselves for our diversity, equity, inclusion, unconscious bias, and management essentials courses. So you can lean on existing recordings to do the trainings rather than having to create from scratch. We've also heard customers use platforms like BetterUp for coaching, which was like very interesting to see, because sometimes if you're a one-person team and it's just probably difficult to coach every single person at the company. And then a few other ways that we at Athena can support, Melanie, if you don't mind moving to the next slide, we have a sample of our existing DE&I training that y'all can access if you want to use that as kind of your kickoff of a DEI strategy. I think Melanie mentioned, like, sometimes we overcomplicate what it can be. So having something shows your team that you care about inclusivity and belonging at your organization. And then if you were to leverage Athena's platform, Melanie mentioned our manager level reporting and integrations that we support to make people like Leda's life as easy as possible so that we can automate all of the nitpicky data stuff that you have to do today.
Thanks, Akila. I'm biased, but I love our product. I think we do a fab job of it if anybody's curious to learn more. All right, so let's do last tip. So leaning on the existing work of others, and here we got a little kitty saying hi. Okay, so leaning on the existing work of others, I'm just going to throw this out there. I think this is really hard for people teams to do. And I think it's particularly hard because oftentimes we are one of, if not the smallest team at the company. And so it feels like we're in a silo. And so it's sort of like, well, I have no one to turn to but myself. And I want to throw out there that actually there are people communities out there. There are resources like this, free resources that you can leverage to get insight and support from other people, learn what other people are doing. So with that said, do you know what? We're going to skip this because we're short on time. Apologize. I'm sure everyone's so sad that I skipped this pulse check question. I'm just going to throw out that I think it's really important that we don't create anything from scratch. I genuinely can't think of a single thing that I would want to create from scratch. I would always want to see what other people are doing and then either leverage that or edit it, because it's so much easier to edit than it is to start from nothing. And so, just a reminder, again, HR has been around for a while, unless you just are at the beginning of the pandemic in, March of, 2020. Outside of that, there are existing resources for everything. And Akila, I saw you unmute. Was that because you want to jump in?
I was just going to say, I think there's a lot of nervousness around AI automating roles, but I think it can actually enhance roles. I recently asked ChatGPT if we can get a discussion guide on a topic that I'd like to train my team on. And it actually did a great kickstart for something like this. So might be a good opportunity for people who don't want to build things from scratch.
Well, that's amazing. Akila, I don't know if you know this, but AI, the people community is all a Twitter with AI, my whole LinkedIn newsfeed, AI. I'm almost sick of it, but no, you're right. There are really smart ways to leverage it. I love that. Actually, I saw someone, quick side tangent for anyone who's maybe curious. I saw someone who actually, they were trying to coach someone on something and they were just blocked. And so they just put the situation into ChatGPT. And for the record, I do want to throw out there that anything that you're doing with AI, please do be mindful of unconscious bias. People are creating these platforms and people are inherently biased. We all are. I have unconscious bias. And so just be mindful when you're using these things. But this person leveraged it as just an unblocker. Okay, let me just look at something that either I like or don't like. And it just made it easier for them to determine then, okay, how am I going to coach this person? So to Akila's point, there really are just endless ways that you could leverage these resources. But if you're a teeny tiny team, you want to make sure, one, that you're not recreating work that already exists out there, and two, that you're not doing more work than you actually need to do. And I know that can sound the easy out, but actually, again, remember, think about it like efficiency. How am I optimizing my time? And so that might mean that actually, you know what? I don't need all the bells and whistles. I don't need the perfect A+ bow version. I just need what I need to achieve X, Y, and Z goal. So, some examples of this could be, why map out a whole complicated DEI framework and goals plan and a DEI council and this and that, when you could just adopt a DEI training and then put that out there to the company. And if you really wanted, you could follow up with a roundtable where everyone has a chance to share their thoughts on the training. Done. Creating an employee survey from scratch. Why? There are so many survey templates out there. Athena, and I'm sure Akila's going to talk about this, or I know Akila's going to talk about this a little bit more. We have a bunch of templates, but also there are some free templates out there available. And so you could just use one instead of having to rack your mind for what questions to ask. Finally, why map out an overly complicated management training series when you could either just leverage an existing management training that's already out there. We have a free one, FYI. And also to Akila's point, I really like the example you gave where someone said, you know what, I'm going to take these webinars that are free. I'm going to have people watch them, and then we're just going to have a discussion group. Alternative versions of that I've heard is, oh, pick a podcast. Like if you want to train people on effective feedback, pick a podcast that has like a really good chat on effective feedback, have your managers watch it, and then just meet for a roundtable discussion. You didn't have to put together a whole presentation. You didn't have to start from scratch to figure out, what are the A, B's, and C's of effective feedback. You used someone else's work, and then you had a discussion about it. You could do the same thing with an Harvard Business Review article, whatever article that you like. There are lower lift ways to achieve the same tasks, and you shouldn't feel guilty about it being lower lift. You should be really proud of the fact that you've freed up time to focus on some of these higher impact initiatives that you might have, like this reverse merger and acquisition that we talked about early on. So with that said, I'm going to kick it over to you, Akila.
Melanie, you already mentioned our free manager course, but didn't highlight that it's starring you. I'd highly recommend, if anyone on this call is interested, focuses on performance management and transitioning from an individual contributor to a manager. So a lot of our customers are using it as a gateway into a management 101 course. And then we have a few templates for you all who are interested in launching a survey and haven't done so yet. Around manager effectiveness, and our existing survey tool has templates for all different topics. So you don't have to start from scratch, as Melanie mentioned.
Yeah, and I really like our survey. I mean, I'm biased, but I think we have such cool survey templates. Like there's one for manager effectiveness, DEI, some others.
Company culture, and so I think, and the cool things, we worked with SMEs already, so you don't have to worry about whether these are the right questions to ask. And you mentioned earlier, keeping the same survey is actually really helpful year over year because of benchmarking. We get to have really productive conversations internally because we ask the same questions every year, so we can see that change over time. Versus if you're sending new trainings out every year, you're sending new surveys out every year, you really don't have any way to measure that. And that's a huge emphasis, I think, on people teams today, is to be able to measure the ROI and the effectiveness of their programs.
Love it. Okay. And I think there's, okay. I thought there was one more. Okay. So let's talk for anyone who's looking at this and saying I'm sold. I want to buy something that will help me save time. And it doesn't have to be Athena, for the record, right? Again, there are lots of things. Akila was talking about BetterUp and, some other platforms that can help. If you think that looking at this, actually, it would be better use of your time and resources to spend money somewhere else, but you're not quite sure how to advocate for this thing that you might want. We have a few quick tips to help you. Make sure that you are optimizing for the things that your CEO is probably optimizing for, which is understanding, how, what it is that you're, how this is ultimately going to save money and how this is ultimately going to benefit the business. So a couple of things to think about is, employee experience and consolidating everything it is, all the different platforms that you're working off of, right? If you have, one platform for surveys, one platform for an LMS, one platform for your training or for your compliance trainings, right? That's a lot of work for your employees, but also that's a lot of money for you. You're having to pay an entire contract for every single platform. Spoiler alert, Athena has all three in one go. So consolidating is a really great way to save some money. The other thing you want to think about is it's so much more expensive to hire someone, even if it's a super junior person. Let's say it's the most junior person possible and you hire them at $60K. $60K is so much more expensive than paying, I don't know, $5,000 for a training, a survey tool, something else. So really think about comparatively how ultimately it actually might save you money to buy something, and make sure that you are researching your vendors, and that you're, that they have what it is that you need for where you are as a company right now. Because the reality is, you might find some vendors that are super, super expensive, but it might be because they have a bunch of bells and whistles that you actually don't need, right? And so you don't need to optimize for the fanciest product out there for whatever it is that you're looking at, whether it be performance management tools or whatever, right? Maybe you don't need the most expensive one. Maybe you just need the baseline one. I know, I'm so sorry, I can't remember if it was Lita who was talking about a couple of free ones that she leverages, but that could be just as effective for you. Akila, I'll pause a moment in case there was anything you wanted to add here. Are you good? All
No,
good?
no, I just wanted to nod and say, yep, you were correct.
Love that. Okay, all. So with that in mind, thank you all for joining. I'll give it a second in case anyone wants to drop any questions in the comments. I did promise everyone that I would share my recommendations for people communities. For anyone who's looking, I recommend the People Ops community run by Alex Hilary at Chart Hub. I also recommend Troop HR, TROOP HR. They're super great. The People Ops community is free. Troop HR, I think, is about like $600 per year. So probably something you could get budget for, maybe. I find it super valuable. And what I like about these in particular is people are actively participating, answering questions, sharing resources. You know, the other day someone was saying like, oh, we're gonna have to do layoffs. I'm really nervous. I've never done this before. Can someone give me some advice? Does anyone have any resources? And you just saw just an outpouring of support. Oh, here's what I used. I know it's really tough. Put time on my calendar. I'm happy to talk you through this. So just make sure that you are leveraging the resources out there, because when you're a teeny tiny team, you need a little bit of help.